The audacity, demanding my seat on a flight. You know those moments where you think, there's no way this person is serious, yeah. That's exactly what happened to me on a flight last month. I travel a decent amount for work, so airports don't really stress me out anymore. Delays, expected. Crying bobbies, part of the experience. People standing up the second the plane lands. I've accepted that as a law of nature. But nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, prepared me for the woman who decided my window seat belonged to her. I had specifically paid extra for that seat, not because I love looking at clouds or taking pictures of the wing. Honestly, I just like leaning against the window and sleeping without getting bumped every 10 minutes. So after boarding, I walk down the aisle, find my row, and someone is already sitting in my seat. At first, I assumed it was an honest mistake. She looked to be in her late 40s, wearing expensive-looking jewelry, scrolling through her phone like she owned the aircraft. I smiled politely. "Hi, I think you're in my seat." She didn't even look up. I know. That should have been my warning sign. I laughed a little because I genuinely thought she was joking. "Oh, well, that's seat 18A mine." She finally looked at me. "No, you'll take the middle seat." "Would you mind switching? Not, can we trade seats? Just." A command, I blinked. "I'm sorry." She sighed dramatically like I was the difficult one. "Need the window seat?" I asked why. She shrugged. "Because I want it." For a second, I just stood there trying to process what I'd heard. I've switched seats before. If someone wanted to sit next to their spouse, sure. Parent wants to be with their kid, absolutely. Medical reason, no problem. But because I want it, that wasn't exactly convincing. I smiled again. "I'd rather keep the seat I paid for." She rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might actually get stuck. Then she waved at the guy sitting in the aisle seat. "He's being selfish." Poor guy looked horrified. He suddenly became very interested in reading the safety card. I don't blame him. Nobody wants to get dragged into airplane drama before takeoff. I repeated myself. "I'd just like my assigned seat." Instead of moving, she crossed her arms. "No, just. No." I honestly didn't know what to say. Who argues with a boarding pass? People behind me were starting to pile up in the aisle. Now everyone was watching. You know that awkward airport silence where nobody says anything but everyone's pretending not to stare? Yeah, that. Finally, a flight attendant noticed the traffic jam and walked over. "Is everything okay here?" Before I could answer, the woman spoke first. "This man is harassing me." I almost laughed. Harassing her? By asking for the seat printed on my boarding pass. The flight attendant looked at me. I calmly handed over my boarding pass. "I think she's sitting in my assigned seat." Attendant checked the ticket, then looked at hers. There wasn't even a second of hesitation. "Ma'am, your seat is actually 23C. 5 rows back, and aisle seat." The woman frowned. "I don't like that seat." Attendant nodded politely. "I understand. Unfortunately, passengers must sit in their assigned seats unless we can accommodate a voluntary change." Simple, professional, problem solved, or so I thought. Because instead of standing up, she actually doubled down. "I'm not moving." The entire row went silent. Even the people across the aisle had stopped pretending not to listen. The flight attendant kept smiling, but I could tell she was already mentally preparing for a long conversation. "Ma'am, if you don't move, we won't be able to finish boarding." "I don't care." That sentence changed everything. Until then, it was just an annoying passenger. Now she was delaying an entire flight full of people. You could hear frustrated sighs coming from behind us. Someone muttered, "Seriously?" Another passenger checked their watch. Meanwhile, she sat there completely unfazed, scrolling on her phone again like nothing was happening. The flight attendant asked one last time, "Will you please move to your assigned seat?" Without looking up, she replied, "No, he can sit somewhere else." That's when I realized this wasn't about the seat anymore. She genuinely believed that if she refused long enough, everyone else would eventually give in, unfortunately for her. The airline had a very different plan. The flight attendant stayed calm. No raised voice, no attitude, just that customer service smile that somehow says, "I'm being polite, but you're running out of chances." "Ma'am," she said, "this is your final request. Please move to your assigned seat." Woman looked up from her phone, sighed dramatically, and said loud enough for half the cabin to hear, "So you're really going to make a big deal over a seat?" I almost laughed. She had delayed boarding for several minutes. She refused 3 direct requests, and somehow, we were the ones making it into a big deal. The flight attendant replied, "No, ma'am. We're simply asking everyone to sit in the seat assigned on their boarding pass." Woman scoffed. "Fly all the time. They've let me switch before." "I'm sure that has happened," the attendant answered, "but only when everyone involved agreed." Emphasis on agreed was impossible to miss. The woman slowly turned toward me. "So, You're really saying no? The entire cabin suddenly became very interested in my answer. I could practically feel dozens of eyes on the back of my head. For a split second, I considered it, would it really be worth all this? Then I remembered two things. First, I'd paid extra for that seat. Second, the middle seat she wanted me to take was between two complete strangers on a 5-hour flight. Yeah, no thanks. I smiled politely. I'd like to keep the seat I paid for. Expression changed instantly. That fake smile disappeared. You know what? She leaned back. Think you're just trying to bully me. At this point, I genuinely didn't know whether she believed what she was saying or if she was just throwing words around hoping one of them would stick. The flight attendant spoke into the intercom phone near the front of the cabin. She didn't say much, just a few quiet words I couldn't hear. Then she thanked the woman one more time for her patience. Patience? I almost admired the attendant's professionalism. A minute later, two gate agents walked onto the plane. Now everyone knew this wasn't ending with a simple seat swap. One of the agents crouched beside the woman. Ma'am, we've been informed there's an issue. There is, she said immediately, pointing at me. He's refusing to let me have the window seat. Gate agent looked at me, then at my boarding pass, then at hers. His face didn't change. Sir is seated correctly according to his ticket. She interrupted him. But I want that seat. I understand. You don't. Do understand. You don't. Conversation had somehow turned into the world's most frustrating loop. People were starting to chuckle quietly, not because it was funny anymore, but because it had become so unbelievably ridiculous. The gate agent finally stood up. Ma'am, you have two options. She folded her arms confidently. I'm listening. You may move to your assigned seat. He paused. Or you'll need to leave the aircraft. You could have heard a pin drop. I don't think she expected that answer. Her confident expression disappeared for just a second, then she laughed. Oh, please. Spent thousands with this airline. I highly doubt you're going to remove me. That was probably the worst sentence she could have said. The gate agent didn't argue, didn't threaten, didn't raise his voice. He simply nodded once. Well, he stepped into the aisle and spoke into his radio. Within another minute, airport security appeared at the aircraft door. Now the whispers around the cabin weren't even whispers anymore. People were openly watching. Some had already pulled out books or headphones, clearly settling in for the show. The woman looked around, finally realizing that absolutely nobody was on her side. Not the crew, not the passengers, not even the man she'd been sitting next to who had quietly moved into the aisle just to stay out of the situation. Security approached politely. Ma'am, we'll need you to come with us. She stared at them. Got to be kidding. I'm afraid not. This is discrimination. One of the officers calmly asked, Can you explain how? She opened her mouth, paused, then changed the subject completely. This airline has terrible customer service. Officer nodded. I understand you're frustrated. Right now, you need to leave the aircraft. For a moment, I honestly thought she was finally going to give up. She stood, picked up her handbag, straightened her jacket, and I thought, finally, it's over. Then she turned toward me one last time. This is all your fault. I blinked. My fault? If you had just been a decent person and switched seats, none of this would have happened. I didn't even respond. There wasn't really anything left to say. The irony was almost impressive. She had refused every reasonable solution offered to her. Yet somehow, in her mind, I was responsible for the consequences. As security escorted her down the aisle, something happened that surprised me. One passenger started clapping, then another, within seconds. Half the cabin joined in. The applause spread through the cabin faster than I expected. Not everyone joined in. Some people just smiled. Others shook their heads like they'd just witnessed the strangest boarding process of their lives. Personally, I was just hoping we could finally leave. The flight attendants thanked everyone for their patience. The boarding door closed, and for the first time in nearly 20 minutes, there was peace. I finally sat down in my actual window seat. It felt oddly satisfying, not because I had won, but because the whole thing was finally over, or so I thought. The man sitting in the aisle seat leaned over with a small grin. Owe you an apology. I looked at him, confused. Almost offered you my seat just to end the argument. I laughed. I don't blame you, he chuckled. Never seen anything like that. Neither had IWE introduced ourselves, and before the plane even pushed back from the gate, we were already joking about what had happened. Then the woman across the aisle leaned over. I heard the whole thing. Oh, here we go again, I thought. Instead, she smiled. You handled that a lot better than I would have. I would have lost my patience after the first no. Laughed. I was close. She pointed toward the front of the cabin. Flight attendants deserve a raise. Nobody disagreed. A few minutes later, one of those same attendants walked down the aisle. When she reached my row, she stopped. I just wanted to thank you. I blinked. What? For staying calm. She explained that situations like this happened more often than most people realized. Usually it was someone trying to sit with family or accidentally taking the wrong seat. Those were easy to fix, but every now and then, someone simply decided the rules didn't apply to them. And those are the difficult ones, she admitted. I asked what would have happened if I just accepted the middle seat. She smiled. Honestly, probably nothing. Then she added something that stuck with me. But the next passenger that person does it to might not be able to speak up. That made me think. Maybe it wasn't really about one seat. Maybe it was about the expectation. If enough people give in because they don't want conflict, eventually, someone starts believing they can get away with it every single time. About 30 minutes into the flight, the captain came over the intercom. He apologized for the departure delay and thanked everyone for their patience. He didn't explain what had happened. He didn't need to, everyone already knew. The rest of the flight was surprisingly enjoyable. People chatted. Some watched movies, others slept. Every once in a while, someone would walk past my row, recognize me from the boarding drama, and give me a little nod. It was kind of funny. I'd accidentally become the seat guy. About 2 hours later, the all-seat passenger turned to me again. You know what the crazy part is? What? If she'd simply asked nicely. He let the sentence hang. Honestly, he had a point. If she'd said something like I'm nervous flying, or I get motion sickness. Or I really prefer the window if you don't mind. I probably would have considered it, maybe even said yes. Not because she was entitled to it, but because kindness goes a long way. Instead, she started with a demand, and somehow expected everyone else to cooperate. There's something strange about entitlement. The more someone believes they deserve special treatment, the more shocked they become when reality disagrees. As we began our descent, I figured that would be the last time I'd ever think about her. I couldn't have been more wrong, because after we landed and walked into the terminal, I spotted a very familiar jacket standing at the customer service desk, and judging by the volume of her voice, she was still arguing.